incrementally assigned IDs, if you will.
Hmm.
Now, the next problem you have to solve is what to do when a transaction happens. Because at the very least, if we say one input, one output transaction, let's assume you have one of the UTXOs of mining a block now, so 1.25 billion Satoshis on it, and you send it whole one piece to another UTXO that's newly created by that transaction. Well, a small portion of your sats are going to be split off and sent as the fee to the person who mines that block. So now, even though you still have a continuous region of Satoshis or sats, you now have a very small portion that will be sent to the miner, and they now have sats that are not sequential with what they have on that UTXO.
Okay.
And this is one of the reasons that it can become very confusing quickly because if everything stayed sequential, so let's say when you make that transaction, instead of maintaining the ordering as it was originally, you just reorder all of them and assign all the numbers again sequentially, it would make it easier to understand, but it would make it to where you would lose the historical reference every time they transferred.
Hmm. That sounds complicated. No lie.
So Casey, I believe in his BIP proposal has the most perfect example I've ever seen.
Okay.
Let me pull that up real quick. I gotta remember where it's stashed.
So
I didn't realize
what?
he had submitted a bit, but that's
He
cool,
did
and I'm
not
going to go
submit
read
it.
that.
He drafted one.
Oh,
I
okay.
guess the way I
So
phrased that was not technically correct.
what you need is like I think if my head works correctly, I think all you really need is for a block to include a state root of the ordinals, right? And that's it. You just
Yeah.
need a 256-bit, just a SHA-256 hash of the state root of the ordinals, and then you can just do proof of inclusions for everything from there. And then you like immediately you open up trustless light clients, and like all this UX shit is fixed. You lose the motivation to fire at full nodes, which so for that sake, I'd be like, you should probably wait on that until like another 20,000 nodes spin up, just because that's cool. But
Oh, is it not in this portion of? I think here he defines it in code, which is slightly less useful.
Yeah, I did skim through that.
Um, okay, so it wasn't here that he defined that. I'll have to find it. It's somewhere in documentation. He does define it in code, but I assume you don't want to try to dig through that line by line to figure out what's going on.
Correct.
Give me a minute to figure out where I read that at. I
Okay.
read all the documentation like the moment I started looking at this and haven't looked back at it recently.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, hi. I was watching the video about installing the Ord wallet, but it's on Windows. Any idea how can I do it on Mac?
Um, Honestly, I've heard the people with if you're M1, I've heard people are having issues with that. If you're on x86, you could probably get it to work, but I don't have any knowledge on how to set up on Mac because I avoid Apple products currently.
Yeah, okay.
Where was this at? Was
Thank you.
it? Maybe it
What's
was
the
in
issue
New York.
Mac users are running into?
I'm unsure. I just heard that people were. Yeah, I can't remember where I saw his. He had like an excellent example showing the breakdown of how. Here it is. So what he did is he broke down in this string saying that if you have three inputs, so numbered 2, 1, and 3, and
Okay.
you're outputting to 4, with 2 as your fees, right?
Hmm.
The ordering scheme, so that way we maintain that all sats have a unique number,
Correct.
is to take each of those blocks. So this would be block 2, AB, and populate the first output will be given those numbers.
Okay.
And then obviously continue on and so forth. So the fee will always be paid with the sats numbered, not the highest, but the latest or the last inputs to the transaction.
Got it.
and it'll be the very tail end Satoshis of there.
So
This
that's
has
that. So that's why people are chasing to be the the oldest input or output.
I
um
guess.
can you explain what you mean by that? I may have
So
misunderstood you.
from what I understand, people are trying to mint these ordinals, right?
Hmm.
I'm saying mint these ordinals, and they
Inscribe,
yeah,
but
inscribe
yes.
inscribe, yeah, and they're putting these transactions into the blocks, and they're trying to be there as soon as possible, so they can have the oldest transaction input per block, because there's from what I understand the mempool is backlogged, and people are trying to get these ordinals in there as soon as possible.
Okay, that doesn't have anything to do with the ordinal numbering here. These are the numbering of the Satoshis themselves.
Ah, okay.
That was that there was a lot of hype, and I'm one of the dissenters of opinion on this, but a lot of NFT people and now ordinal people, because they've started to combine and create a whole new
Yep.
type of species here.
Yep.
They are of the opinion that ordinals with lower so if you were to count upwards through the ordinals as they're created, so the
Hmm.
very first one being the first one created, they're of the opinion that lower numbers will have more value in
Yeah.
a secondary
That's
market later
that's
on.
that's the typical the whole minting ideology. Obviously, you're if you created the Genesis mint, you have the pretty much like a legacy coin or a legacy mint, right?
Exactly. And I'm not arguing that it won't
Other
provide any
better.
value.
Mm-hmm.
My disagreement with those people comes down to that Satoshis have some unique or numerical characteristics, and I feel like those will provide more value in the long run. So creating an inscription with a Satoshi that say is a prime number. If you could get a Satoshi that's a prime number and inscribe something cool on it, that has way more value in my mind than, oh yeah, this Satoshi just happens to have been inscribed in the first 10,000 inscriptions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But that's a secondary market thing, and I'm going to admit that my
But that's also
opinions about
a
second
psychological play, right?
exactly
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
opinions on secondary market are based out of my twisted view of what's logical, and people don't do what's logical. If they were, things would play differently, and we wouldn't have some NFTs worth way more than I think they should be,
Mm-hmm.
and some worth way less.
So you're
Yeah,
saying
somebody just bought the checks now. You know those checks? Bought number 1111 for like 17 ETH.
Oh
Right?
no,
Just because of the token ID. So basically, that's the same thing because you have a low number, you have the same type of numerological number, quote
it is a
unquote.
good number. I will give them
Yeah,
11 is one of the numbers that would be nice to have.
yeah. On the floor, it's basically 7 times lower. Yeah,
Um,
or actually more, 9 times lower.
so on the actual numbering of sats though, was that sufficient to help you
yeah,
kind of
yeah, I got that part. Thank you. My,
perfect?
my my next question is some clarification on how these inscriptions are attached or burned. I doubt they're burned into Satoshi, or is it like a second layer? There's a message up here. Somebody's messaging in the chat box here. Let's see. Is it normal that Bitcoin Core takes 2 days to sync? Okay. Yeah, that's normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty par for the course. You can get a faster sync if you have a better connection, or um, if you had somebody who has a copy locally, you could sync off of their node, still doing the verification steps to make sure that everything's kosher.
I don't know if this has been said, but when are these ordinals been inscribed or minted?
People are already inscribing on Satoshis that are numbered by ordinals.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that as well. From what I understand, ordinals can be, like I guess double inscribed.
That's something that I brought up a few times. It's not something that's practical right now. It's something that Could be done, but it's theoretical and it probably will not be. Well, I don't know because Casey mentioned he was interested in exploring the idea as well, but it doesn't undermine the immutability aspect. So I guess to roll back to your question, because that will walk forward into this pretty easily.
Okay.
If we assume that we have now have numbered sats, so that's ordinal theory. The process of inscribing is to make a transaction with those sats, moving them from one UTXO to another, but including segregated witness data, which was supposed to be used for things like signatures, some financial data, wallet configuration type
Correct.
stuff. Instead, we can now just pack a file in there.
Yeah, makes
There's
sense.
nothing preventing that.
Sure. Yeah.
By doing so, the protocol is right now that the first Satoshi in that transaction, which will go to our output, is now going to be assigned the content that we submitted with the segregated witness data.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The only correlation is that they are effectively we've created a mapping on chain saying this Satoshi has this value. And that's immutable. Give me 1 second to clear my background noise.
Okay. Let's see what
When it's gone. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna read the chat here. Can someone give me an explanation of ordinals like I'm 5 years old? That's kind of what we're doing right now. Yeah, I got my Sparrow wallet ready for ords, but
I apologize about that. So, where was I? Okay, so you've created a mapping of Satoshi A. We'll call it, in fact, let's just assign it a number. We'll say it's 101, even though it's technically locked in the Genesis block. So Satoshi 101 points to a picture of your dog. Now, to answer the question about double inscribing, which is something I brought up a few times, there is nothing preventing you from creating another transaction and putting in the segregated witness data another file.
okay.
This doesn't overwrite the other one, and a sane option. This is an option that I would, if I was guiding Casey. I'm not involved in development here, but let's say he asked my advice. This would be one of the options I'd present. Is the oldest mapping of Satoshi A, Satoshi 101 in our case, to the picture of the dog would take precedence because it's older. It has more provenance in art terms.
I love that idea.
The alternative, and this is the one I would the option I'd personally choose, is that we maintain, because they're stored in the blockchain and they're immutable anyways, you can't delete them. You can never undo that original mapping because it's stored forever.
Right.
My option would be that by default, if you're on a site that only displays one inscription per Satoshi, you use the oldest. But allow services and sites to use those additional layers that have been inscribed onto a Satoshi. So let's say I inscribe a dog the first time, but I inscribe another picture of my dog later. Now that Satoshi is effectively an album of pictures of my dog. To use an example of a project someone in the Discord is working on, they've inscribed 11 different songs onto the blockchain. If we had the ability to double, triple inscribe, they could have inscribed all those songs into a single Satoshi, and then that Satoshi would actually represent an album of 11 different audio files.
Okay.
All right, but is it possible to change it all the time, or you have to change it only once? Is it like? Yeah, go ahead.
You will never be able to permanently change it. It is immutable once it's written there. Like once you've created that mapping, that file is statically attached to that forever. There's no option to go back and remove segregated witness data.
So with SegWit, there's a possibility that the inscriptions can be compiled an infinite amount of times.
That would be the direction I would personally argue for. Again, Casey is driving the project's direction at this time, with I assume excellent advisement from others in the community. As such, he could go the other direction and just say we only respect the first mapping of A to B.
Okay.
Whereas I'm saying we should be able to map A to B, and then later on, by adding an A to C mapping, we would effectively create a mapping of A to an array of BC.
Okay. So where's my question here? My last question I want to ask, and I'll let other people talk, is it's it sounds ridiculous that all this data is being held on the blockchain. So I know, and I haven't looked into it, but I'm almost 100% positive that this data that people are inscribing are not actually being held within the blockchain. So is Ordinals utilizing IPFS or some sort of other tech?
No, it's on chain. You can verify it yourself, assuming you have a fully synced node.
Okay.
Unless you have purposefully pruned your segregated witness data, which
Uh-huh.
is possible.
Okay.
If a node operator really just was really angry about people having JPEGs and wanted the storage space back, or let's say you're in an emerging market and you don't have the capital to maintain that kind of storage space, you can't afford to have the storage space necessary for this, then it is possible to prune the segregated witness data on a per node basis. But there's enough nodes that aren't going to do that. I know multiple people. In fact, I'd bet that anybody in here who has done an inscription is never going to purge their SegWit data. It's just not reasonable to do so.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One more that I just thought of. So what happens when, and I'm sure it's already happened? Question mark.
Yeah.
With if somebody inscribes quote unquote illegal data on the blockchain.
So it has happened. It's happened well before
Yeah.
ordinal theory was really further developed.
Yeah.
It's happened before inscriptions.
Correct.
The complicated answer is that technically that data will still be downloaded to other nodes.
Yeah.
The upside is that data is part of blocks that are really just transaction data. So it's not the same as let's say, to avoid getting into the evil parts of what you could inscribe here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's not encourage that.
Right.
Let's say you live in a country that thinks that the anarchist cookbook should be banned. Specifically, it's an old book about basically making fireworks at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to, somebody could inscribe the anarchist cookbook into the blockchain. In most countries that value most reasonable extent of things, this isn't going to be a problem. But now let's take an instance and a country where it might be a problem. If I was to inscribe the Wikipedia article regarding Tiananmen Square, there may be a specific country that would become angry about that.
Which, by the way, somebody did inscribe the photo of Tiananmen Square the other day, which, hoorah.
So at that point, it becomes a game of both cat and mouse and the government trying to keep up with technology, which they've proven, almost every government has proven themselves incapable of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to argue this is the best way, but this is the way it'll end up playing out in most places, where countries who choose to be authoritarian will tell their citizens to stop running nodes. Any citizens who value having access to information that their government doesn't want them to have, which humans are rebellious by nature, will find ways to run nodes underground, or will find ways to access nodes running outside their country without running a node themselves. And there's the third angle here, assuming we're not talking about countries and we're not talking about something as innocuous as historical events or, a firecracker making book. Let's assume this person has done any of the content that we could both agree is very evil and put that on there. The sad part about having a censorship resistant chain is that there are not tools to censor content.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somebody has a solution. I'm not aware of one.
Can I hop in real quick?
Yeah, I'd love it. If you
So,
guys, if you know something on that I don't, I'd love to hear it.
well, no, I don't think I know anything you don't. I just, I don't know. It's something that I care about, so I comment to it. So whoever solves this problem that we're discussing right now is hands down going to be the richest person. The reality is that there probably isn't an absolute solution to it. In the case of inscriptions, though, the debate over like being forced to store data that you morally don't agree with or is illegal, however you want to frame it, um, it doesn't hold a lot of water because the data inside the inscription envelope is prunable or deletable with no security trade-offs. Once you've validated that block, once your node has said, all right, that's all good, then you can just get rid of that data immediately. Now, the Bitcoin client today does not have an easy feature to do that. There's no button that you can press to just do that for you. However, it should be, based on my understanding of it, it should be a pretty trivial feature add. And ultimately, what that does is it means that A, nobody can be forced to store information they don't agree with storing, and B, or at least not in the format of inscription, and B, nodes that want to support encryption data are heavily motivated to spin up and stay online. So there's a direct incentive to support the data, which is something that you don't normally get. Usually, running a node is sort of an altruistic act. Like there's some benefits if you get a little bit more like data. You can sell like RPC services or whatever, but there's no inherent motivating factor like why should I spin up a node? It's usually just because you care. But now, if you start an inscription collection, you really want to make sure that you spin up a node and you hold that node up because that's preserve making sure it holds it, has it. But it's worth note when people get grumpy about being forced to store data that they shouldn't have to. The problem right now, and this isn't meant as a business goal, but the problem right now isn't that they're forced to store it; it's that they're ignorant as to how to not.
Yeah, and I do agree. I had mentioned early on that one of the things you can do is you can prune all of the segregated witness data if you wanted to. So you are capable of removing it from your specific node. Um, Sadly, I don't think that'll help if government becomes involved and said you can't run a node. That won't help you there. Um, Still useful though to be able to move it to.
Down the road, can the government force people to spend down? Like there's so many different ways to hit, and like there's no one feed. It's like the switch that flips.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people even argue like at a certain point, if you assume of upside against benchmark native L1, eventually you wind up in a scenario where you're encroaching on the market share of currency issuers, right? Because the production of currency is a market just like any other market. And if you started fabricating rocking chairs, then the guy who owns 98% of the rocking chair business is probably going to try and shit on you a couple times. So at some point, if the speculative upside exists, if the price keeps increasing, then at some point, currency issuers are going to be like, no, like that shit's got to go. And they like, I think it's completely pragmatic that they would retaliate in some way. And it's just going to, ultimately, it's going to be up to the participants of the network, whether it's like worth defending sort of right to run the network or not. Yeah.
Well, this has definitely been a lot to grok, so I think I'm going to step out. But thank you guys for all the descriptions. Definitely going to be looking into some of this stuff, and I'm sure you'll see me around. Take care, guys.
See you around, Fractal.
Yeah, I'll take my time to say thank you for all the good information. I'm definitely gonna be back tomorrow, hopefully with a little bit less people here, so I can ask you guys some questions. And yeah, good luck. Enjoy.
Later.
Later.
Question. So, in regards to the potential collateral damage due to screen satoshis and cost of transaction fees, in addition to that, other than I guess SegWit would be the right. For now, I guess that's the only thing we can look forward to.
So
Is there
this
a way
is
in a way
This
that
is
you
a
would influx of transaction fees is bad, because what it means is that block space is competitive. The service is being used.
Mm-hmm.
So like why would, assuming that it's like, some legitimate use case and not like Roger Ver spamming the blockchain,
Mm-hmm.
um, what's the problem with fees?
okay. So this is one of the more controversial issues right now.
Right.
And I'm going to admit that I don't align with a lot of the larger camps. So this is purely opinionated, biased, if you will, and you should try to filter that bias if you're able to. The the block space and fees thing is kind of a misleading argument on both sides. So let's look at a couple arguments that kind of prove this. Oh, well, SegWit data only gets charged 1/4 of what financial data does. And that's true. But SegWit data also only counts for 1/4 of how much space it's taking. Where each block will allow one VMB of space. Because the weighting for SegWit data is 1/4, it only takes up 1/4 of the space that it was. Now, there is the fee side, which I'm of the coupled. The fee needs to be full, while the virtual space on, or the weighted space, needs to still remain at the 1/4 that it's at. That's also both problems. As for what Post Capone was saying, the competition of market is good. When you look forward to a future where we continue having halvings, miners won't mind if there's not value in doing so. At the end of the day, nobody is this moral paragon who's going to throw money away for no reason. Okay, some people are, but very few. So, with that in mind, fees will become the driving force for miners to continue doing what they do. Increasing to a reasonable extent the fees necessary to process transactions doesn't seem like a problem to me. Especially when we have for cheaper fees for financial network. There's a couple other layer twos being experimented with that, as that technology matures, will remove a lot of the pressure from financial transactions. And as ordinals and inscriptions mature, I would expect that we will also see innovations on that front that will remove some of the pressure. And we'll see less junk being written to the blockchain, like as we saw with a lot of trash that we made. Instead, you want valuable data being written because the cost has grown to a point where you're not going to just burn money to do silly stuff.
Correct.
So we're in a weird spot though, where hype is driving it for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So I fundamentally agree that reserve, like trying to, so I like to say it in this form. Bitcoin censors what can be written so that it doesn't have to worry about censoring who can write. Whereas Ethereum goes for a more romantic dream where they're like, we want to try and let everybody write everything and see if it works. Which it's kind of not, right? Like the Tornado Cash situation kind of shows, like, there's probably stuff you can't let people write, or at least not without provoking some fights. Which there's
I'm
parallels to
pro
that with
tornado
Bitcoin.
cash.
I am too. For what I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not doing it. I use it.
Same here.
Yeah, right. I use it. I'm just saying, like, it provokes conflict. That's all I'm saying. So, and Bitcoin could too. Like we just talked about how storing particular data to Bitcoin could promote conflict. So that's not like a one-sided argument by any means. But especially considering that the data is prunable and it's not enforcing any like real long-term storage bloat. Even if it were enforcing long-term storage bloat, we're talking about like 10 gigs a year increase, which is pretty trivial. I don't know. I don't know that this inscription thing thwarts this. Let's reserve it for financial use cases. I don't know. I don't like. How do you maximize ownership, but then also tell people how or what they should own, right? And a fundamental concept in Bitcoin is maximizing ownership. Disintermediation is fundamentally equal to maximizing ownership. So if people want to own it in this way, then I don't get what the problem is. I do think all the use cases and sensitive to censoring what can be written so that you don't have to censor who can write are both very valid arguments and should sort of be consumed in that. I just don't see how inscriptions violates either of them.
So one thing I've been kind of bringing up, I don't know, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah.
So one thing I was always thinking is like how I'm coming from Litecoin, so I think of the recent update, Mimblewimble extension blocks, and that adds fungibility onto that side of the block. It's an extension block. It's a separate block with its own protocol. And so to me, that looking at it from that lens, I see that like Bitcoin base block or Litecoin, the base block there is the non-fungible side. And if you want to do fungible transactions, you got to use the extension block. So I think that it's a soft fork. Um, I think it's a possible solution for Bitcoin.
But I'm sorry, is the case that um, the introduction of ordinals compromises fungibility, and so you create a need to divert to this other service?
I think fungibility has already been compromised from the beginning. Like it's
Right.
I
Yeah.
was think
Bitcoin fundamentally semi-fungible, right?
so. Yeah, I mean, leave it at that side. I'm sure my earbuds are dying, but um, you leave the fungibility on the base side or non-fungibility on the base side, and then just use the Nimble extension block for all of the fungible transactions. You could, on that side, the receiver is not able to see like how much is in your wallet. They just see how much they get. They
Sure.
don't see what sats they get. It's on that side until they peg out and back into the base block. They see what sats. It's a big coin join, um, and it's secured by the miners. So more fees also for the miners and separate space with its own, I believe, a transaction weight, a fee market. Not necessarily, it's one fee market, but like, what's it called? Um, Fee rate, I guess you could say, for that type of transaction, like Segwit is. I think that's a pretty good solution.
I think that both privacy layer and privacy by default are like good explorations. Um, the basic argument against privacy layer or like leaning towards privacy by default, if I'm understanding the case being made, and I might not be, I don't know.
It's optional.
You're right. Well, so if you make privacy by default, then you increase the anonymity set to equal the user set, and which inherently improves anonymity. Whereas if you have anonymity as an option, like as a privacy layer, then you have selective use of anonymity, which almost sort of discourages honest anonymity because of a fear of associating with a criminal act, right? So that's like the most conventional argument against layers, like a privacy layer versus privacy by default.
Sure, but I think that what might happen is, I mean, we're not going to hard fork Bitcoin with privacy now involved from the beginning. So it really has to be optional as an option added onto it.
Yeah,
And with
I think the answer
ordinals,
there is teaching people why anonymity matters and what's good about it. And,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, definitely, absolutely. But I also think that ordinals could actually push financial transactions onto that side, onto the extension block, where they won't have to compete for that, for the cost, for the block space, especially
I
during
agree.
times of high demand.
I agree. I was having this conversation the other day in a Twitter thread, and the person I was talking to was of the opinion that ordinals broke CoinJoin, and it was kind of a difficult conversation because you're like, look, if you put like USD notes are serialized, and you can coin join them by shoving them in a shoebox, shaking it around, and having everybody pull money back out. And you've effectively done the same thing as coin join. And in fact, today, right now, with ordinals, like the ordinal numbers going in, and then the ordinals going out. You just don't necessarily know how the internal transactions associate. Um, so I mean, yeah, I use also, like I said, I use Tornado Cash, I use CoinJoin. I think it's good.
Indigo, question. Are you the same Indigo that was in the Twitter spaces today, like 2 or 3 different spaces?
Yeah, I've been in and out quite a few.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I keep bumping into you in these spaces.
I'm yeah, thanks. Definitely interested in it. So I'm around.
Same here. Same here.
Hey,
Yeah.
Cypher,
What's up?
who transcribed the audio into the ordinal?
There was someone mentioned it in general chat earlier. I'll get you a name if you give me a second.
Thank you.
I know that we have full support for song or for MP3, I believe it was. But this person claimed that they had already inscribed 11 songs. It was Skrill Ventura with a fire emoji, then drum emoji, then fire emoji. I'll mention them. Or no, because that'll ping them.
There's a bunch of Bitcoin jingle audios in there. It's fun.
Here's a
Yep.
question: what's the maximum data size that you can add to or inscribe into these ordinals?
So, assuming that that the protocol doesn't evolve to allow joining individual parts, you would be capped at 4 megabytes.
Oh, okay, that's good to know because I was wondering, are people going to be uploading, documentaries on here?
Yeah, so the reason you're capped at 4 megabytes, remember, if you remember, I said that the weight, if you will, for SegWit is a quarter, and you're capped at 1 megabyte of that weight.
Yep.
So 4 times that. Technically, there's a tiny bit of overhead from the actual transaction itself, so there'd be slightly less than 4 megabytes. And trying to get that transaction on the blockchain without a mining pool cooperating with you is basically impossible. Somebody's already done it. I could find the block number for you if you're interested. But it's ridiculous. And other than doing it to show that you can, if you were like a pool operator, there's no valid reason to do that.
Okay. So what's the general thing that's being inscribed?
So there's a lot of just random junk, people experimenting with the protocol. There's a few different really cool projects that I've seen so far. So Ordinal Hub has the most complete listing of projects, I believe, right now.
Okay, that's a website, I assume. I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, I'm actually streaming it right now.
Oh, okay. I'll go to your your
Uh,
stream.
I'll open the ones that I personally find really cool. So I like the anti-NFT BTC maxis, this project art,
Yeah, that looks cool.
and they're done in like playing card format with a serial number included on them. So those are super neat. The Ordinal Miners is pretty cool. It's like grizzled old dudes who mine with a Bitcoin logo over it. This is actually the people behind this one are involved with mining pools, which, as those will be the future source of new sats, as they're paid out by the subsidies, will be the people with the access sats, whether that's, say, the first sat of a new whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, their whole idea behind Ordinal Miners is involved in rare sat hunting. Time chain collectibles is kind of cool if you're into that sort of vibe. Whole bunch I don't have any interest in. People have done like a punks derivative.
Of course.
There's apes derivatives. You always have to have it. It's not my thing, but I'll never tell somebody that they shouldn't be.
Hey, Cypher,
Daimyo.
Hey, Maxi, the first game.
What do you mean by that?
Is that the trading card game?
No, they're trading.
Okay, got it.
I think there's about 7 of them that are inscribed so far. 6.
That's cool.
They look super dope.
So
Ordinals.
when you go here, you just click what mint now. You just pay the fee and they mint it.
I assume so. I'm not sure how they've structured their minting process. The fact they're calling it minting makes me think that they're ETH degens who have come over.
Yeah.
So, trust them as far as you could throw them.
It's typical terminology nowadays. It's I definitely can't break the habit from minting to inscription. It's gonna take a while.
It's been hard. It's been hard, but I try because I feel like there's there's enough distinction in the actual practical application side.
Absolutely, 100%. There's big difference. Big
Exactly,
difference.
where it justifies trying to make my language fit it.
Yep.
Ordinauts is super cool. I Some of their other ones
Yeah.
with like some cool backgrounds have really spoke to me, and I wish I had the ability to pick one up right now.
Mm-hmm.
Pokesats is awesome. I can't believe they don't have a picture site. These are super cool. The guy, like, really, dude, don't make me go find the image on Discord. So he's doing the original 150 a spinoff. So this would be Squirtle.
That is awesome. How
Dude, they look so good.
I'm gonna geek out on
He
this, man.
posted he posted Bulbasaur earlier. I was like, man, take all my money.
That's awesome.
So Pokesats is definitely probably in my top three. This one I already mentioned. I believe I mentioned these two as well. Yeah.
That's cool.
And I'm sure there's other ones. Those are just the ones that I personally feel strongly of that are already listed on the hub. I think this is the most stupid project. Again, people should do what makes them happy.
Udah dibayar sama mama.
Hold on, let me mute this. Who is that?
Ini nomor.
All right, muted.
So this one, I think it's incredibly stupid to pay the kind of prices people are for a check mark. But hey, Twitter has proven people will buy check marks for the right price.
Right? Yeah. So there's this wallet that people are mentioning, the squirrel wallet. I think it's squirrel, right?
Sparrow.
Sparrow, way off. It's some type of animal. Yeah, sparrow. Sparrow wallet. Explain that. That I have not looked into. I just seen people throwing that around.
So Sparrow is just a light Bitcoin wallet. So light is in you do not run the node
Oh, that's
yourself.
cool. Okay.
So it's using an external node that you
Yeah.
kind of have a little bit of implicit trust with an external node.
What is it?
But
Using Electron?
it might be. I don't know for sure on that. The reason Sparrow is recommended though is that it's the light wallet with probably the best UTXO management features.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're talking about trying to control where an individual sat goes, it's very, very important to manage UTXOs with care.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing you want to do is, inscribe some really amazing art and then pay that as a fee to a mining pool because you messed up UTXO order.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps there. If you tried to use just any other light wallet for Bitcoin, it would work. You'd be able to receive ordinals, assuming that it can receive Taproot transactions.
Yeah, I'm sure that in the future, this is like right now. This sounds like it's not for the general public to be messing with because you'll mess up a lot of things. There's even, from what I understand, if you're using your core, your QT wallet with all your bitcoins in it, there's a possibility you might screw that up and destroy your entire damn wallet.
Pretty safe, but I haven't heard anybody breaking a wallet yet. But it's still alpha software, so
yeah.
Caution should be had. I believe he mentions in the documentation, don't put any material amount of funds in the wallet you're working with ordinals on. A lot of people are actually even going so far as to put the individual ordinals in different wallets.
It's probably a pretty good practice.
Yeah.
Like the Ord kit gives you very good tooling to safely manage it. Like everything, you have to use it correctly, and there's always a possibility for a fat fingering kind of incident and something gets messed up. There definitely should be and will be better light clients and better end user like UX development stuff. One of the I guess one of the more technical considerations to give, though, is that because there is no authoritative, like a state root, which there's no authoritative figure on the Bitcoin blockchain that's included as part of consensus that says this is the state of the ordinals. It's not possible for a light client to really know what's going on with the inscriptions. So a light client has to trust a full node right now. It can ask a bunch of different full nodes to try and make sure that it's not trusting one evil one or something like that. You can minimize trust assumptions, but you can't bring them to zero currently. So it's definitely better to run a full node. Like if you want to participate in it, the only really ideal way is to run a full node. And like running a full node is pretty simple. It's like the easiest node you're going to run out of anything, especially a network of this size that gets this much done. I would say it kind of can be for the general public, so to speak, because you learn a couple new concepts along the way, but like you could get up and going. It's mostly just time and hard drive space. Like it might feel a bit inconvenient, but it can definitely be done. I mean, there's loads of people that are doing it right now that have never touched it before. And if you're like really into it, I would say like give it a shot. Like give spinning a node up a shot. And if you use the light client stuff, just read the documentation on how to use it and follow it carefully and pay attention to possible ways that things could get messed up.
Yeah,
But a lot of that going quickly.
I have a question about there's this space for like 500 people, and they just asked me if you would come along and like drop some, like, I know like you're not like the main dev or anything like that, but you do
I'm
have
not even a
knowledge.
dev. I'm not even a dev for this project. I'm just
I
some
know,
random dude on the internet.
I know. Okay, but there's people just interested in learning, and I feel like it would be like, if you want, you don't have to, because there's a lot of people in here too who are like going out of the way to go on Discord and learn. But if you want to, I don't know, they just asked me to ask if you want to come and answer. There's a lot of people who probably have questions, and it's like only like 500 people. It's not that much, but it's that I feel like that would be a benefit on an educational term, because I feel like you know a lot more than a lot of other people who are like around. There's like 5 people I would ask. Charlie's probably busy, and I don't know, like if you are down, or
It's going to
I
cost
don't
you
know,
an ordinal.
pauses in here.
Yeah, send me any inscription, and we're no. The more important question for me, because I did kind of make a verbal commitment to it. Did you have anything else you needed or would like to talk about, John?
No, I'm good. I appreciate that. I do want to follow if you're going to jump over there.
Okay, I have no idea where I'm jumping. I don't actually even do Twitter Spaces really. I just joined one for the first time
Yo,
yesterday as a
Sky, like,
listener.
I'm gonna add you right now, and then my name is Bless. I don't know, and then I'll send you the DM of like the space, because this would be actually just educational. I think it's like a really good Leap Spaces. He does them like every night, and he gets like around like 500 people in his spaces all the
Okay.
time. And it's just informational. We just talk about information and different things. So if
My
you're
Twitter is on my Discord profile.
okay, cool. I'll send you a DM and I'll send you the space. But yeah, definitely would be cool
Can
to see you
you-
answer some questions, because nobody up there knows anything besides me. I know the basics, and I'm not gonna
Nobody
feel
knows
like
anything. Assumption to make in this world.
Hey, Bless,
Okay,
can you,
I just followed you.
Can you post a link here in the chat?
Yeah, I'll post the link for you guys in the chats. And yeah, I just followed you. I'm gonna send you the link too, and I'm gonna a lot of people are excited about the tech, and some people are like, like, I would agree with the people who are like, the why are you guys doing it, because the why is because it's fun, but the people who do have like a little bit of technical questions, I feel like you'd be able to answer it. So I just posted it in like the main ordinals chats, like the one that we have here in our voice channel. And so yeah, I'll see you guys there in a bit.
Sounds good. Catch you here in a minute. Yeah, man, I like talking to folks. I don't always know everything. In fact, I rarely know most of the things, but still, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I appreciate that.
Yep. And if I'm ever out that way, I'll swing by. We'll hang out.
Sounds good, man. I'll be jumping over there too.
That's the joy of the crypto world, dude. Every time I go to a different city, I end up absolutely plastered the whole time I'm there because everybody's like, "Yeah, come have one beer," and then it's like, "Oh, come have one beer," and by the time you know yours,
And that's where you leak your private keys. Yeah.
you don't bring your private keys with you.
Smart.
Called good operational security. Just don't even do it because you know better.
Crypto? What is crypto? Think about crypto? Yeah, exactly.
Dude, yeah, I saw crypto once. I saw the Bitcoins are all the way up at like 60K still.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I
The
apologize if I hurt any of you
the
with that.
last time I
I'll
heard
go away now.
Bitcoins, Bitcoins, it was a real thing. People called Bitcoins, like just as a singularity, Bitcoins. Now people are more in the whole Satoshi factor. But that was in the early days, Bitcoins. And now when I hear it, people that say Bitcoins, yeah, the last time I heard that was late last year when some coworkers were like, yeah, this Coinbase just came out, public, coming up on the stock market. And, if you want to buy some Bitcoins, you can buy it from them because they make it. They know how to make it. So buy some Bitcoins from those guys. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, I never know what's in the oven.
you know, that's
I'm
that's
sorry, man. I'm gonna drop out and go
yeah,
ruin their spacious
yeah. Let's
form
go,
real
dude.
quick.
Let's go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Footage.
So, like, at least my motivation, and I don't think Digital's is, although he might take up some issue with me. It's not that we're like trying to, say this is bad or that this is like trying to stifle innovation. It's just about asking the questions and more to like what Neo was asking, like what's the motivation and trying to understand is the motivation here because there's new technology that can do things unlike or better than other technology, or is it primary? And again, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with value here because opportunity is an opportunity cost. So people that may be spending a lot of hours or time into something that I don't know, maybe it does have a technological opportunity. That time better spent there versus time better somewhere that could actually provide that technological value. And that's kind of more where I was coming from, trying to understand what it does better as far for for NFTs.
In my opinion, the main characteristic I see which Ethereum didn't have is that it is completely decentralized. In my opinion, like Ethereum has a CEO called Vitalik Buterin, and Bitcoin has no CEO. So that's the power of Bitcoin. And when you put something on an ordinal, which is on chain, no one can change it. So in my opinion, because you can do that with ETH, that was discussed before, but I mean, you can have the hash and you can have the contract or something like that. But in Bitcoin, you have way more possibilities. There was a guy that minted the game of Doom, and you can go into the ordinal and the computer runs the program and you can play Doom. It opens a whole new Pandora's box of opportunities also for journalists. They can publish their findings here and they can't be censored. So in my opinion, it is more an excitement on the technology and the things we're going to be able to create with this.
Sure. When you say they can't, are you saying does that imply that everything you just said, Ethereum would like you could like if a journalist minted something on chain on Ethereum, you're saying that the journalist could be censored there? And do you think that the lack of full decentralization on Ethereum is an existential threat to Ethereum itself?
Well, yes and no, because Ethereum is such a big fish that honestly I see it really hard for it to fail. Myself, I own a lot of NFTs on Ethereum, but I do see a new technology with the BTC ordinals. And if any of the guys in the audience are listening to this and are thinking this is something interesting, you should go into the rabbit hole because it's really deep and it's really interesting.
So to me, it's like multiple things. I think from, obviously an art perspective, I think it's cool. And there is a statement and something to be said about being able to deploy on, basically through a medium that is censorless and decentralized and everything, all the typical cliche shit that we typically talk about. That's pretty cool. I do think from a tech perspective, the whole idea of it is interesting. I know we've read a couple articles and discussed is this against the ethos of Bitcoin, so on and so forth. I don't think so. I don't necessarily think that. Marlon, I did want to ask you something. You said that you believe that the ordinal punks are going to flip V2 CryptoPunks, right? They're going to flip the CryptoPunks that we all know and love. For anybody who doesn't know, there's two versions of CryptoPunks. There's the V1s and then there's the V2s. Most people don't know about the V1s. There's a whole story behind that. But the point is, do you think the fact that they're on Bitcoin actually creates a narrative that's somehow more advantageous or more bullish than the traditional CryptoPunks? Because yes, even though that these are the first ones on Bitcoin, CryptoPunks are really what started this whole 10K generative PFP thing. And I think the provenance with that can't really be replaced whether or not something's on Bitcoin or not. Now, like ZK said earlier, I do think that Bitcoin whales are different. I think the liquidity there is just different. The market cap is significantly higher. These things can fly, and not only that, there's only 100 of them, as far as I know. So that's really interesting to me that most of these collections are limited to 100. I'm sure eventually people will start doing bigger collections, but
Is anyone here?
I don't know. I think the whole thing's kind of exciting. I mean, what was the thought process with the Moonbird? Is the
Wow.
Moonbird part of a bigger collection, or was that just like one specific one that was put out? You said you weren't able to receive the allow list. So could you
Yeah,
describe
I
kind of
asked
the
earlier,
process of
but want to
how this
again.
project's
Anyone
developing?
here installed
Are you
the
giving
Ord
allow
wallet
lists
on
to
Mac?
discords and then launching? What's the backstory behind that?
The what?
Do you know how to install the Ord wallet on MacBook M1?
Oh, actually, I'm gonna
No,
bring
not a Mac.
Cypher up
I
here,
don't.
and I would love to actually talk to Cypher about
Okay.
what's being
Everybody,
pulled. Marlon, go ahead
Thanks.
everybody's taking
while I'm
off
bringing him up.
with that link over to the Twitter space.
Yeah, so the process,
What's the link
saw
again in general?
happened with the
Yeah, if you
first
go to the
100
Ordinals
10K
chat box,
was that
there's a link
about
to Twitter
7 months
Spaces.
ago, the Rod Armor guy started like sharing
Alright.
his
So if
findings.
do you know where it's
So
at?
there
You
were
know
some
the
devs over the
the
world
voice
that
channel that we're
already
in.
knew
If
that
you
this was going to
hover
come
over
out.
the
So they
title
already
Ordinals
were
chat,
kind of
there's a little chat
planning
box
some
there.
different
If you click on
collections.
that,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
I
Because
and
see.
then
of
Okay,
then
thanks.
you'll see
how
the
they
Twitter
get
Spaces.
minted
Yeah.
and the whole
Alright.
gas wars and all
Thank
that,
Mm-hmm.
these collections needed to be really short and
Chill.
scarce. In the
Yeah.
case of the punks, there were only 100. In the
Ciao.
case of mine, they were only 12. There are only 12 of these birds. And there is another collection that I think has 100 birds as well under the 10K, but those are in Goldens. And yeah, as you said, they are more scarce. They have an amazing provenance. They are really rare. And yeah, it's just a matter of time before they flip the V2 punks. Because, in my humble opinion, V1 punks should be way more expensive than V2 punks. And for example, you could not destroy the contracts of the punks, but maybe you could destroy the image from which both V1 and V2 take
Yo,
the
my bad. I had to
reference for the
steal
NFT,
Cypher.
if you know what I mean.
These
And in
spaces were getting
ordinals, you cannot
annoying. They
destroy
had
the
a lot of
image.
people didn't know what was going on.
Punks
So
are
I
a lot
wanted him
more
to go in
optional,
there and
but
drop
like you
some
guys
knowledge
said, I think
because
the thing
there was a
that makes
lot
it
of
interesting is
fun
and I
and
think only
yeah.
time will tell how these things are valued. If anybody
I
has
said
any
not going to
questions
lie.
for
The
the
Twitter
ordinal
space sounds a
punks,
little
you can bring it up
cringe.
to the top.
Yeah,
I'd
that's
really
just.
appreciate that.
I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. You know. So
And you know
hopefully,
what it is? These guys, they're not even like. I don't even like. There's two of them that just like to argue for the sake of arguing, and one doesn't even like NFTs in general. It's like, why are you even
so
like?
do you have a way to get him up there to talk to
No,
educate people?
he's up there. He's up there. He's up there. He got
What's
up
his
there.
name?
So
Cipher.
Well, let's see.
I appreciate you
Oh,
Cypher's
oh,
up there. He's
hold on. There's a lot of people.
Yeah, Cy's up. He's a speaker now. He's out here. He's there with his glasses. But yeah.
Oh, there he is. There he is. I see him.
Yeah, so many people are just like like those people weren't even thinking about like they were just asking why. There's this guy named Illa in there who's pretty cool. He should have said it. He's like just the
Oh,
energy
hold
of
on, hold on,
wanting
hold on,
just to
hold on.
create.
I am
Oh, he's
currently.
talking. He's talking.
I'm currently recording
Yeah.
right now.
The cypherpunk side of things. So anytime you can throw, a
I'm gonna mute
bomb
right
of
now. Okay.
chaos into the mix, especially when it comes to more stratified projects like Bitcoin, Ethereum. There's no bad to be had there. Worst case scenario, we'll decide this isn't the direction to go, and we'll come up with a different direction.
Thought that. So how are the Bitcoin people really feeling about this right now? I've seen mixed thoughts. Some people really like it. Some people think it's going against the ethos of Satoshi. What are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of the Bitcoin people are suffering from both the same problem that some of the people on the opposite side, the people who are diehard ordinals as the future folks. in that there's a lot of misinformation because a good example is we're saying ordinals when in fact we're talking about inscriptions. So there's this issue with the nomenclature as well as a lot changed all at once. We're talking about SegWit data, but really we're not using it for segregated witness purposes. We're using it to store bulk data now. There's concerns about block size, but those aren't real because you should be able to prune segregated witness data. There's outstanding issues regarding that on Bitcoin Core. So as for how they're feeling, if we're going to talk about feelings, some of them are raging because to them this was a purely financial instrument for the longest time. But I would argue this is just a continuance of the OP return wars and the block size wars to a limited extent.
Interesting.
Like the can got kicked down the road, and we recreated exactly what the concern was.
Interesting. So look, I mean, NFTs did a lot for Ethereum. It put it in the pop culture, it brought a lot of creators, artists, community. It really did quite a bit for Ethereum. And then we've seen this with other blockchains as well. Do you think something similar could happen with Bitcoin? Do you think a entirely new audience could come in, building projects, creating art, communities, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. And I'd actually like to say a very significant thank you to all the people who've come over from ETH and are now running a Bitcoin node. You have no idea the sense of satisfaction I've got out of going to Bitcoin Maxis, who I'm friends with, and going, yeah, you're running a node, right? Oh, you're not? Oh, well, these ETH degens have figured out how to do it. Like that has a certain sort of sick satisfaction to it, if you will, as well as they're contributing to the network. They're driving fees, which will be the future driver of mining and the ability to keep people mining. I think it's going to be an overall positive effect. I don't think it's going to be the same as ETH like NFTs because it's fundamentally different, both in the inscription process and I think from a marketing perspective. But I think it will be a positive impact on Bitcoin as a whole.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, no, and I actually agree. I fully agree. I think running a node it's an important thing to know. Now, I do want to ask you this. So we say Solana bozos, ETH MFers. What are we going to use for Bitcoin? What are we calling the Bitcoin people?
They're maxis, bro. They already got their
The
name.
Bitcoin maxis, the Bitcoin degens.
Yeah.
Well, look, Cypher, what do you think?
Have you?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, have you ever had that uncle who's telling you the sky is falling for the last like 12 years?
Actually, yeah.
That's half the Bitcoin maxis I know, and the other half are super awesome.
Interesting. Okay, so I mean, what do you think about like a big part of ETH NFTs and so just NFTs in general is that it brings in a ton of bad actors, right? Because the hype and the ability to really social engineer people, scam people, trick people, it just goes through the roof, right? It's actually unbelievable. And a big thing that happens on with ETH NFTs, Solana NFTs, and all these other ones is that your wallet can easily get phished and things of that nature. There's a lot of security risk, and it makes it hard to operate for most people. Do those same risks exist with Bitcoin and the NFTs there and the ordinals? I think a lot of us are really new to that side of it. So from a security aspect and someone who's brand new getting involved there, what are some things that you should know? Is it the same thing like with the ETH? If you connect your wallet to the wrong thing, it can drain your NFTs. Is that the same way it is on Bitcoin?
No, so that's a byproduct of smart contracts, which Bitcoin doesn't have. Some people would say for worse, some would say for better. But the majority of times that you get phished, it's that you clicked in allow, really, right? And you said, hey, I authorize this transaction or this contract to spend all my crypto punks. And by spend, I mean transfer them to them. You can't do that with Bitcoin, so that's one major protection. Right now, the barrier to entry with ordinals and inscription is that you need to be running a full node. That, in effect, means that people have to learn the basics and the bare minimum before they can even engage with this. They can't just go on, crypto.com, buy some ETH, buy a crypto punk, and then lose it out the window, in 30 seconds.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Now, that level of friction will have to come down. Hopefully, it comes down proportionally to us having tooling developed that can adequately reduce that risk for the more casual user.
Interesting. No, that's wild. I mean, so it's a completely different level of security risk compared to ETH or Solana or anything there. Okay, well that's pretty cool. I mean, what do you think about the amount of, or not rather the amount, but the type of NFTs that are being inscribed over there? Is it currently people just ripping media JPEGs from ETH and porting it over, or are you seeing a lot more original art? Are you seeing more projects? Are there communities being formed, or is this right now just strictly okay? These things are being deployed, people are flipping them immediately and moving on to the next thing. What are your thoughts on that?
There's a lot of, I mean, just like any time you can store bulk data, there's a lot of junk currently being deployed and inscribed, but there's also a lot of AI generative art because that was something that's become rather, I don't want to use the word vogue, it's become more popular lately. There's also a lot of projects that had been holding art. Since we're in a bear market, they didn't want to launch into a bear market, which, I can understand that point of view. And they now have an opportunity to deploy that art in a market that's got a fair bit of hype around it. And when the tooling comes online, that at the very least you'll have a successful inscription. I don't know the verb form for that.
So Cypher,
If somebody else has a
one final question, and then we'll go through some of the hands here. And we actually have Ordinal Wallet requesting to come up as well, so we'll bring them up and hear from them. I think that could be interesting. So a big part of NFTs on ETH, and obviously on other chains as well, is that royalties are really admired and like again an interesting aspect of it. Artists can get paid in perpetuity forever, and every time their art is traded, they can get a little bit of a piece of that. Obviously, we've had problems in the past with people circumventing royalties, and there's been solutions presented for that, but that's a whole different story. Are there royalties when trading these Bitcoin NFTs, and is that something that, if not now, could be implemented in the future?
So with the lack of smart contracts, that is a problem that does arise. I should be very clear. I've worked actually on an EVM compatible chain for a play to earn game, so I understand that business model relatively well. Um, we don't have the capability due to the lack of smart contracts for that currently, but I see no reason that if the appetite was there for it, that a marketplace couldn't institute that.
So
And it's as simple as by only dealing with that marketplace, you can starve out any competition that doesn't meet the community's appetite.
Okay, so because there's no, so this is a big difference between the two. And I'm just learning about this in real time, just like everybody else. I'm not an authority on the subject, so I do appreciate you answering these questions that might be kind of more noobish. But without having the smart contracts, obviously that limits capacity and what these things can do, right? The cool thing about NFTs on ETH and other chains is you can do dynamic NFTs, you can change the metadata. There's so many interesting gamification type routes that you can take and things that make it engaging to hold, right? Without smart contracts, you lose all of that. So I could see something like a check. So a big project right now on ETH is the Checks VB by Jack Butcher. They've changed the metadata multiple times. There's burning. There's all of these different things. We wouldn't really be able to see something like that, at least currently, using ordinals. And then in regards to the royalties, I think one of the big uh, bullish factors of these Bitcoin NFTs, quote unquote, is that they're decentralized, they're censorless, they're on Bitcoin, they're there forever. You can't fuck with them, you can't mess with them. They're just there, they're in stone. But then in order to enforce royalties, which again people are talking about, oh, Bitcoin NFTs are great for art and high value art items, then you're going to have to essentially make them centralized by limiting trading to specific marketplaces, which we see all the time with Ethereum NFTs. Like QQL by Tyler Hobbs, they blocked X2Y2 and other 0% royalty marketplaces, limiting them only to OpenSea, which again it's debated on whether or not that's good or bad, right? Because it's a little bit more centralized and there's a ton of conversation around that. So do you think having to limit them to a specific ordinal integrated marketplace, does that kind of defeat the whole purpose of them being decentralized?
Yes, absolutely. If your goal is to bring over the business model with no changes from ETH, I don't think that is the approach to have. I think that ordinals both will need a new model, a new spin on things, as well as I think that treating them as yet another means to distribute profile pictures is drastically undercutting the value here. In that I'm very hopefully in the near future, I would love to see historical data, historical records being inscribed onto the blockchain, because history sometimes changes when the victors change, right? But making that a literal part of what many of us consider to be financial data at this point means that that can't be changed.
Interesting. So is that where you see the most important, like if you could have the grail in your head, and not just for you, but a lot of your friends that are on that side of it, for them, what is the grail? I don't think, like you said, it's going to be PFPs in the way that we have them here. And I think you said it perfectly. I think expecting to bring the same model that NFTs have currently now on Ethereum over to Bitcoin probably doesn't make sense. Right? Like, it's just different markets, it's different use case. The whole thing is just different. So if you could, like, what is the grail in your head? What is the North Star of Bitcoin NFTs?
Okay, so for me, if I could have the perfect inscription, it would be, so currently the majority of inscriptions are meant to be opened in a browser. A fully implemented Bitcoin client in JavaScript that could run in browser, meaning I would then have an inscription of a Bitcoin node.
Could you, okay, I'm not going to lie, a lot of that goes over my head. Could you kind of put that like in TLDR as if I'm 5 years old?
So if you're running Bitcoin Core as your Bitcoin client currently, instead you would open the inscription and reference your local files, and it would continue running like a node off of that inscription's code.
Interesting. And how
that would be the grail for me. I realize that's way outside the scope of what most people are interested in, but again, chaos is kind of what I like to see in this.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I've said this many times. I'm a huge advocate for people doing things that make people uncomfortable, breaking the mold, trying new things. That's what I think most of the space was built on in the first place. For that situation, that scenario that you just laid out, how many years do you think we are away from that?
That depends on if somebody can figure out how to fit all the code necessary for a Bitcoin node into the 4 megabyte limit we're working with currently.
Do you think that?
I think it's possible. I feel like that's feasible. I don't know anybody who's even considered starting to work on something like that.
Cypher, what about this? Could you see music or sonic audio qualities being inscribed over there? Is that something that people have talked about?
So there's a gentleman in the Discord who told me earlier today that he's inscribed 11 songs, and we're working on getting his project added to Ordinal Hub currently.
Let's go.
As for, I will say there's a potential there for high quality audio may become a problem because of the sheer file size. If you start talking like FLACC files or FLAC, sorry.
Interesting. Yeah, I know Illa on stage here, who is a phenomenal musician, was talking earlier tonight about possibly inscribing music over there. So maybe you two could connect here in the DMs and make something happen. I would love to see his work over there. Cypher, I really appreciate you coming up and breaking this stuff down. Please come back anytime you'd like, because this is something that's not going to go away. And I can tell everyone in this room right now, just from my perspective, even if it's a bit selfish, I'm going to be talking about this for a while. I love Bitcoin. That's where I started. And to be able to bridge the gap between two. Now, for full disclosure, again, I don't hold any of these ordinal NFTs, these inscriptions, however you want to put it. I plan on getting involved in it. As I said, I want to put my PFP over there. But but also this does not replace ETH NFTs. This is supplementary. This is a completely different thing. It's in addition, right? So I don't think we should talk in absolutes like ETH NFTs versus Bitcoin NFTs. I think there's two very separate things with different use cases, different audiences. It's just a completely different thing, right? The same way that I look at Solana NFTs.
What are the Bitcoin? What are the Bitcoin use cases? That's the part I'm missing.
Hey,
what are the
I
use
just want to
cases?
make a point. I want to make a point related to the last statement. You can actually put large files on ordinals over multiple transactions, so you connect them.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I guess that would.
And what about using EIP 20 in a diamond standard on Ethereum? All on chain.
I happen to be a massive fan of diamonds. cut my first facets probably 2 months ago, I want to say. Time flies when you're dealing in crypto. Um, I will say that's not something we can do on Bitcoin. We don't have smart contracts. I would argue that anybody who's really excited about blockchain and decentralization and starting to get into that cypherpunk part of of life wants all of these to continue. I don't want Ethereum to go away. I don't want Bitcoin to go away. I don't even want Litecoin to go away. Instead, I want them all to continue progressing and developing this technology. So that way, eventually, one of them will stand out as, oh, this is the go to for this purpose. This is the go to for this purpose. And Ethereum's come a long way. There's amazing projects on there. I don't want to disparage that by any means. But Ethereum is still, I hate to use this word, but it's still early. Your parents don't have MetaMask.
So Cypher, I've been asking the rest of the audience for a while now, and unfortunately, the most of the NFT people, but you're a Bitcoin. Why didn't OmniCoin, OmniChannel, OmniWallet, or the first actual smart contracts that were actually on the Bitcoin network not prevail? And why is this standard occurring now? If the prevalent chain in terms of preservation of culture, which is what I believe it was you were saying in terms of inscription and immutable data, immutably immutable. Why didn't the first smart contracts that were built on the Bitcoin network, which was the first smart contracts ever, continue via Craig Sellers and others, Mastercoin and the like, that were built on the Bitcoin network? Why the need to force it now once the smart contract meta has already been built out and DApps based on the Ethereum network have proven, especially with EIP 2535s in terms of semi-fungible tokens and the ability to have monetary transactability in a static perpetual nature, combined with things like diamond contract functionality. Like, why are we going back 12 years to something that was obviously kind of put to the side because Bitcoin network wasn't made to do what the Ethereum network was built to do? That's my fundamental question.
No, and that's an excellent question. I do feel the need to preface my response with, I am not what people would call a Bitcoin maxi. Again, my previous role was working on Polygon on a game, or on the Polygon chain on a game. I don't want to imply I was working for Polygon. So with that in mind, I can still provide what I believe is a reasonable answer. The people involved in Bitcoin are resistant to change. And that's reasonable considering the whole idea is to be immutable and not change. This is, in my opinion, the first time we've seen Bitcoin people really even consider a new change. There's people involved in the Discord. Charlie is an excellent example.
Is anybody, Cypher, is anybody familiar with OmniChain or OmniWallet or Omnicoin or Mastercoin that literally were the smart contracts on that ever existed and were on the Bitcoin network? Does nobody know about these?
So I will say I do not know about those. But again, I am not what many people would call a Bitcoin maxi. I'm a software dev who puts pieces together as best he can.
Hey, did they delete the history of those smart contracts when they did SegWit? Is that what happened?
No, it still exists. Literally look up Mastercoin, Mastercoin, OmniWallet, OmniChain, Omni Foundation were the first smart contracts
Can you
ever
still
built
use
were
those?
on the Bitcoin network.
Can you still use them?
Yes.
That's actually
Yes.
first sidechain protocol, but yeah.
And if that's the case, if it's a sidechain protocol, I think that's awesome. I wish I had been aware of it sooner. I appreciate you for giving me something to look into further. I feel like though smart contracts and digital artifacts are different enough realms that it's worth exploring them separately for now. Ethereum's already proven that smart contracts and digital assets, specifically NFTs, can be combined in amazing and creative ways to produce really good stuff. I feel like this is something new to explore. And again, in my mind, that's the purpose for having all these different hands in the cookie jar. Somebody will eventually find the best cookie. Maybe this isn't it. Ordinals may not be the next big thing, but for now, I think they're really cool. The idea of treating them as digital artifacts that don't change and are not tied to a smart contract, that's neat. I'm a huge fan of IPFS. I've argued for it for about an hour today with folks, but having the data on chain is really cool. There's plenty of ETH projects that do that, by the way. Again, by no means am I trying to disparage the existing projects, which I think are doing excellent.
Well, Cypher and Fidel, I appreciate the exchange. I want to throw it to some of the hands here. Again, if you have any, so I'm looking for specific questions too that we can ask to Cypher. And we got also Ordinal Wallet up here. And if there's anybody who has expertise in this or has been messing around with it, please send me a DM so I can bring you up on stage. But if you have any specific questions, click that button in the bottom right hand corner and drop them in that comment section, as well as like, comment, retweet. And if you know anybody that is experienced with this, again, who has expertise, ping them or maybe connect me with them. I'd love to talk to more people that are involved in this and just try to learn as much about it as possible. Before we go to the hands, Cyber, I want to ask you one final question here. What is the proper verbiage, right? So should I call it Bitcoin NFT? Do I call it an inscription? Do I say ordinal NFT? What's the proper way to identify it?
Was that directed at
Yep.
me? Okay. My understanding of the nomenclature is that we are inscribing inscriptions or digital artifacts, as the quotes were in the paper, onto Satoshis that are numbered according to ordinal theory. So to answer the simple form of the question you asked, I would call them inscriptions because that seems like the noun form of inscribed to me. I would love to hear Casey or somebody more authoritative from the project state specifically what they think it is. But I guess at the end of the day, language is for the people who use it, right? If the community at large decides that these are Bitcoin NFTs, then that'll probably be the nomenclature that sticks.
Yeah, I've been calling them ordinals, and that seems to be sticking. But we speak and we do things, and as we go along, the names start to stick, right? Inscriptions or ordinals.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I haven't really known what to call them, because NFTs, it's not just like it's a non-fungible token, right? So if these are not non-fungible tokens, then it doesn't make sense to call them NFTs, even if in theory and in perception that might be what they are. But if they're not non-fungible tokens, then yeah. So inscriptions, I guess that makes sense. Okay, well that's cool. I appreciate
Do you
it.
think do you think there might be a way to add data to Gwei?
It's an interesting thought. Can you elaborate?
Absolutely. My understanding. Would you prefer to elaborate, and then I'll respond to your question? Would that be better, Digital?
Sure. For those, everybody knows that Gwei is the format or the variable essentially for gas, right? Gwei was the original 1980, I believe, reference to the original blockchain or cryptocurrency idea by, I think it was a Stanford professor, I believe, correct? Is that
It's not
mistaken?
possible, but it's not possible to assign metadata to Gwei in the same way that you do to Satoshis, because
in a reference manner.
no, because like the reason that you can do it on Sats is because of like the UTXO model, right? So like on Ethereum, if I have $1 and I want to send you 50 cents, the system is balance based, and so it says Dota has $1, and then I send Digital 50 cents, and then so then it says you have 50 cents, I have 50 cents. In Bitcoin, it's actually the UTXO is like having a bill, like $1 bill. And so if I'm going to give you 50 cents, I literally tear that one specific piece of paper, that one bill, in half, and I give you half. And then if I want to give someone 10 cents, I tear off 1/10 of that dollar bill and hand it to them. And so that's actually the insight of ordinals at all, is that individual satoshis are actually already non-fungible, because what you're actually doing is you're passing out these little scraps of a dollar bill and then like taping them back together and then handing them off to each other. So it's a totally different system than in Ethereum, where a way
Right,
is actually just like a balance in a balance in like a hash map.
But couldn't I create a referenceable asset or medium that was by definition non-fungible, that was inherently transcribed onto the metadata or the actual code of the underlying GUI? In essence, I
Absolutely.
think I could.
There's no
So
like
what you're asking,
Way are actually, this is the irony. Way are actually fungible and Satoshis are non-fungible.
That's correct. They are NFTs.
So they are non-fungible
So-
tokens.
Yes, you can put the same data on ordinals twice, and it will be a different set. It will be referenced differently.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. I appreciate the breakdown on that. Go ahead, Vijay. I didn't mean to cut you off.
So to answer Digital's question with the exact opposite answer, in my opinion, any system where you can define the minimum denomination could have a ordinal theory designed for it. So like in our case, we had to work around UTXOs, obviously, right, on Bitcoin side. In the Ethereum side, because you're treating it like a balance sheet and you're just subtracting and adding to it, you'd probably treat it like a first in, last out queue or a last in, first out queue. But I don't see any reason that if you can define the minimum denomination, that you couldn't assign ordinals to them. And as long as you're going to define ordinals, then creating a contract on ETH that said, hey, let's assign this value to this ordinal, that's just a simple
But
mapping.
how do you define a way? Like a Satoshi already has an identifier, but a way does not.
That's why I said specifically if you define the minimum denomination. I don't know, is a way the minimum denomination in Ethereum, or can you have half a way?
No, a way is the minimum definition, but it's held as like a balance in, like almost like a hash of an object, right? So that you just say, Dota has one way and Cipher has one way, but they're completely fungible in that there's no differentiation between my way and your way. Whereas in Bitcoin, because of the UTXO model, you can actually trace, you can trace back almost like a genealogy to see if you're holding a piece of Satoshi's original Bitcoins. And you can't do that. You can't find out if you have one of Vitalik's original way.
So I couldn't create a reference model.
Well, you can write anything in a smart contract, but there's a fundamental like difference in terms of the addressing of UTXOs in Bitcoin versus the addressing of Way in Ethereum.
I guess what I'm trying to say is just because the source code or the fundamental way that it is designed doesn't necessarily mean that it couldn't be designed around the same way ecosystem. And what I'm trying to say is, what does it mean? It goes back to the origins of the conversation, which is, why does it have value? What you're implying is that it's not designed at the moment to be similarly accomplishable off of a GUI model or a smaller denominational model. But if it could, then in kind of reverse, what does it matter that it's able to be done on the Bitcoin network now? Is what I guess what I'm trying to get at.
Well, the conversation was about is it an NFT? Leap, I think you can take over here, but it is. It is an NFT, an ordinal is an inscription.
I mean, that's super interesting because sometimes we just equate JPEGs to NFTs and vice versa. We just use the words essentially interoperably. But, an NFT is a specific thing. So knowing that they are essentially non-fungible tokens, I think is an interesting fact and maybe makes it a little bit more palatable for people on ETH that are thinking about moving over. So that's really cool. I mean, look, the more that y'all talk about it, the more that it actually excites me because again, I don't remember the last time something like this came up. Obviously, we have new chains all the time. When Aptos popped off, people were talking about it quite a bit, and then there was Canto and things of that nature. But this is different. This isn't something that's brand new. Bitcoin's been around for a while, and it's gonna be around for a while. And I find that really compelling. So I want to go to the hands here. I want to hear what people have to say. I got to go to Natalie first, and then we got to go to Truth. Natalie, what's going on?
First of all, what's up, Leap? And shout out to all the friends in the chat. Motivate had his hand up since 1955. If I can be a fake co-host and give Motivate a chance to like leap in, and I'm happy to bring my. I gotta go sharpen my pitchfork real quickly.
Oh, please sharpen away. I'm ready for the hot takes. All right, we're gonna throw it over to Motivate. Motivate, what is going on?
And if you're not there, we have some problem with DM you and fuck you.
He's not even here. He's not.
I don't think he's here, but when he gets back, I would love to hear from him. What I would say is I've heard these conversations across like Twitter spaces for the last few days. And I think it's incredibly problematic when people sit on stages and misinform people. Like, it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, like, I don't spend any time over there in Bitcoin communities, so I really don't know. Let's go get some people from the Bitcoin community. I'm glad some of them are on stage today. But I'd also love to see some more Pepe's and fake rare folks on these stages, so people can really understand the culture that they've built over there for the God knows how many years, and like what's actually happening over there, because people actually don't know the shit that y'all pull over here. And when I say y'all, I'm saying the space in general. It's They'll fucking fork you over there for that shit. You don't go over there thinking you can like exert your fake ass influence and think that you can go pull your pump and dumps over there, especially like in fake rares. That's somebody asked me today, oh, Natalie, can you point me to any Bitcoin communities that I can join? And the thing is, like the communities that I belong to, like I'm responsible for you, and it's kind of unsaid, but I'm responsible for you. So no, I can't point you over there because I don't know how you act. You got if you get out of line, then I have to fork you. And so I think it's people need to understand that some people over there like want to create culture. They've created culture. They've spent time cultivating those communities. They believe in the ethos and underpinnings of the space. While some of you just throw that shit up in the air because you want to make money or get validation from weird ass people in this space, or because you just want to be seen. And so I think people need to really assess like what their actual intention is, like trying to go over there. And I'm not talking about ordinals. Like I know folks kind of dancing in that kind of space or whatever. I'm talking about like real Bitcoin NFT communities, and the folks over there have been over there kind of digging out the trenches since time and continuum. In fact, the other day I hosted with my homegirl Louise, aka Lou, Skrillex, who's a super OG in the Bitcoin music community, and I hosted his album release, and we had a good ass time, and it was just reminding me of the culture that exists over there and how people are super gung ho to kind of center freedom and the things that we've been talking about in this ecosystem since time and continuum before many of you ended up here onboarded by a bunch of trash ass people. But I know that's spicy, but that's just real as fuck. And so, like, I urge people to kind of read the Bitcoin, Satoshi, whatever y'all want to call it today, Bitcoin white papers. I really think about like why you want to exist here and like why y'all are going over there just because people are running their fucking stupid hot takes and telling you all kinds of bullshit. Because you'll run into people over there, and it's not that they're not nice. It's not that they're against change, is that they want to keep intact the underpinnings and the S of the space because we all had to fight for that shit while some of you don't fight for anything. Like, let's keep it funky. So I just want folks to understand like those things, and it's not a spicy or a hot take. It's just real as fuck. And like I'm really sick of people just saying shit just to get a rise out of people, or saying shit just to get attention, or saying shit because they want to like rile people up on stage and start shit. I think ultimately everybody, and I stake my reputation on that I fuck with over on Bitcoin. Excuse me, I got allergies. That I fuck with on Bitcoin, whether it's Skrilla or Pork Chop or like other folks with really weird ass names. I stake my reputation on the fact that they continue to fight for the ethos and the pillars of this space, and they really believe in that shit. And they really love art. They really love building culture. They really love building belonging and ushering folks who really understand fuck with this space. And it's not that they're against change. They're against people coming in and just running fuck shit, pumping and dumping, and kind of destroying the things that we've all built here. And so like I I would also say like people like Skrilla have been innovators. They made space for y'all to even exist here. To say even say that is like mad problematic to me because they've been experimenting. They've been building things. They've been building counterparty and fake rares and rep Pepe and all that whole like thing over there. And so like I think folks need to really have a come in a blockchain moment and stop like running behind people who don't even like hang out over there. So that's all I wanted to say. Leap, I appreciate you, and don't come for me because I will definitely come for you.
Thanks, Natalie. I appreciate the take. So just to kind of like dive in a little bit more and understand, your ethos on this and how you feel. I mean, was there something specifically that somebody said that you felt was like wrong or out of pocket, or are you more so kind of are you like you see it problematic that a lot of ETH people are going over for essentially NFTs? Like, what's kind of your thoughts on that?
I think I've heard so much stuff that's problematic, to be honest with you. People saying there's no communities over there, people aren't building dApps. Like, there's been people trying to figure out how to use like stacks and like all kinds of other things to build on top of like Bitcoin. Like, people built Counterparty, people built a lot of things over there. If they didn't have Counterparty, if they didn't build the communities over there, none of y'all would be here. Let's be hyper honest here. So I myself came out of Vandal and some other folks who were like knee deep in the Bitcoin music scene, and so like um, I just think a lot of people are just throwing shit out like things like that, and I'm just like, y'all don't hang out over there. So like let's have some real people on stage who actually exist there and are fucking with ordinals and developing those things and actually in rare pepes, actually in fake rares, actually fucking with scarcity and counterparty and doing those and engaging in those communities like every single day so that people get a really clear view and clarification about what's actually happening and not people's like long dissertations based on their assumptions or what they think or what they heard from somebody else in a Twitter space. Let's get it straight from the Pepe's mouth.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would love to talk to any of those individuals that you mentioned. I mean, it would actually be awesome if we could connect in the DMs and maybe we could bring some of those individuals because I mean, I guess the point of doing these Twitter spaces, and again, maybe it's a bit selfish, but I just want to learn about this, and I think it's super interesting and fun. I mean, do you think? And I agree with you, by the way, right? Like all those individuals that set the foundation for NFTs for this whole space to exist came from over there, right? Bitcoin is the OG. That's where all it came from. But do you see it as good now that many people here want to get involved in it? I mean, again, I think NFTs did quite a bit for Ethereum and adoption and putting it in the public eye. And maybe that's something similar that could happen with Bitcoin. And I mean, at the end of the day, people are doing these transactions peer to peer and really transacting with the currency, which is the long term. I mean, that is the North Star for crypto, right? That people are actually using it to transact. So I see that as a pretty good thing. I do think in the process of that becoming a little bit more adopted, I mean, I agree with you. I think there's going to be bad actors. I think there's going to be pump and dumps. That's just to me, part of the natural progression of this stuff. And, you know, I think it's going to take time. I think it's growing pains. But I think at a fundamental level, the fact that, and I'll tell you this, Natalie, we've talked about in this space, we've probably talked about Bitcoin in the past 4 months, maybe a couple times maximum. I like, in context, like more so than a passing thing where it just comes up. It doesn't get talked about in Twitter spaces that often, at least from the ETH side of things. And I think the fact that people are now discussing it on Twitter openly, publicly, I mean, that's pretty bullish. And even if there's some bullshit that's going on right now, some fuck shit, and people are trying to figure out the best way to operate, I still think it's a decently good thing that people are now discussing it. Bitcoin is, in my opinion, the grail. I think it's the OG. I think it's going to be here the longest. And I think it's the most decentralized, which are all really great things. So to me, I see it as a net positive. Whether or not ordinals are going to be, because like, look, I mean, there was Emmercoin, there's Namecoin, there's been so many chains that people have been putting NFTs on. This isn't a new thing for people to experiment with. I mean, what do you think about all that?
I mean, no, again, let me say this. Like, I'm not against ordinals. I'm not an ordinals, like, hater. Like, again, like, I spend a lot of time with those people all the damn time, every day. I'm the first to say, like, I don't care about mass adoption. I think it's a fallacy. I think it's hella problematic that people keep pressing forth that rhetoric. Mass adoption is essentially people getting onboarded, massive amounts of people getting onboarded onto the side of a road in a deserted in the Sahara Desert at a gas station with no people for miles to actually help them, to onboard them with safety and security, to onboard them so they have buddies or people in their verticals or communities to actually help them along. And like when I was onboarding people with like Motivate and Cas Vegas and Black Dave, like there are somehow down the line there became like the film vertical and like the music people and like all these folks had somebody to go to so that they can go back and say, hey, like, I got a question or I need this. Mass adoption essentially also has led to the erasure, historical erasure. It's led to people engaging in very problematic behavior that's what I would essentially say is against kind of the ethos of the space. And every time you want to say, hey, like, we want to board 1 million people, but who gives a fuck about safety, security? Who cares about transparency? Who cares about sovereignty or freedom or artists to be able to create here? I always will take a huge issue with that. Again, some of us had to fight to actually be here to create the spaces that we did, to onboard tens of thousands of people, and those people onboarded hundreds of thousands of people. And so some of you never had to lose anything. Some of you never got trigger warning like death threats. Some of you never had to go through the things to actually build up the foundation, even whether first or second generation of this space. And so you never have to give up shit. And so this idea of like mass adoption, and let me kind of rewind and say this, Leap, is that I'm not saying that we don't need new people here. That's what people always automatically say or want to argue with me about. I've onboarded probably more people in this whole entire space put together with Eric and Kaz Vegas and Black Dave and BitBuds, who's a super OG, was on Silk Road, and Alan Hanna and like all these other people. However, like, I'm not saying we shouldn't onboard new people. I'm saying we should onboard people sustainably. In some cases, at the moment, we need to degrowth, embrace that shit, and kick all these fucking grifters and scammers out and clean up aisle 5, as I always say, and make sure that we're actually clean up the space so we can continue to onboard people into a space where they're not subjected to bullshit, or at least mitigate the harm. And so, but no, we don't care about that. We want the validation. We want the access to checks. We want the access to big brands who extract. And so that will forever be a huge issue for me, because I came up with a bunch of cats that were in Bitcoin and were knee deep and built that shit. And so, like, I will never believe in the shit that some of y'all believe. And for me, that's cool. Like, I'm not going to argue with you. We're not going to have a debate. I don't believe in mass adoption, but what I do believe in, if people want to participate in the Bitcoin community, go over there and observe. Go see what's happening. Don't sit there and think you could just jump in and like take over, like do the same shit that y'all do over here. Bot fucking space. It's not easy. I'm about to bot this space right now. The number's getting low.
Okay. What does this have to do with
Well, no,
ordinals?
I would like to.
It has a lot to do with it. It has a lot to do with ordinals. He asked me a question.
What are we talking
No.
about?
No. I think there's actually no. I appreciate what Natalie's saying though, because there is some important stuff in here, and I like the exchange. So, and you said something that was so important and so impactful. I agree with you. There's a lot of people like. So I agree and disagree, and we don't have to jump into a full debate, but I do think you brought up a lot of great points that are worth discussing. And as you can see, a ton of hands popped up. So I appreciate you coming with the heat, because this is the kind of energy that we need to have engaging discussions that really push us forward. Now, I don't believe in mass adoption. I think that's more so like a verbiage thing, because what you're saying is you want people to be involved, but obviously be involved the right way. And you said something
sustainable
exactly,
growth.
and you said something that was super interesting, which is like, what are we onboarding to, right? You're like dropping someone at a gas station in the middle of the desert with nothing. I agree with you on that. I don't think the space is ready for millions and millions of people to come in. I think slow, sustainable growth, exactly like you said, where we have proper infrastructure, proper safety tools, and like, there's so much that needs to be done. So we're on the same page there. I do think one of the other things you said was also really interesting, where you said many of y'all didn't have to kind of like bleed for this shit, essentially, if you get what I'm saying. And I agree with you there too. I think but that being said, the early adopters, the people that did have to bleed for it, those are the ones that went through it. And they do that so the new people don't have to. So there's something that comes up quite a bit, which is, you know, just get rugged a few times. That's how you'll learn the NFT space. You got to get fucked over a few times to learn the NFT space. And while I think that there might be some truth to the fact that if you do get screwed over, you're going to learn a lot, I don't think it should be a necessity. And I think that and not saying that you're saying this is something I've heard other people say, but I think that implying that people need to get screwed over to win is not great. Because look, and I talk about this all the time. My parents came to this country with $1 in their pocket, didn't even speak the language, had to literally grind in a way that I just think that it's even hard to comprehend. Like, and one of these days, I'll tell the story of my parents and how they got to this point. But they had to go through all that, and they wanted to go through all that so that I didn't have to start from $1, and I had a running head start compared to where they were. And now I'm gonna, work as hard as I can to make sure that inevitably, when I do have kids or whenever that happens, that they don't have to start from the spot that I did. And I think it's similar with crypto. These early adopters, these explorer, these visionaries that were here, they went through all of that shit so that the new people don't have to. And I don't think that should be used to say like, oh, none of y'all had to go through it, so you don't get it. Well, I do agree that there is a sense of truth in the sense, yeah, I mean, the new people aren't going to understand what mining Bitcoin in 2012 was and how much shit and how many years had to go by for Bitcoin to get to the point where it could be 69,000, and we're even in a Twitter space talking about it. Like, if you even think about that, we're on Twitter, a centralized Web 2 platform, and it's something called a Twitter space discussing ordinals. I mean, like, if you were to tell somebody this 10 years ago, nobody would ever fucking believe
They
you.
would have looked at you crazy as fuck.
100%. You're so right. 100%. They'd be like, "What are you talking about? That's impossible." Even back in the day when I was, posting on Bitcoin forums and things like that, there was not even a thought in my mind that this could be a cultural thing where there would be community. I just thought it'd be like a currency and people would transact with it and things of that nature. So where it went and what happened, especially with ETH NFTs, I think, and I don't want to jump the gun on it. Obviously, ETH NFTs took a while to get to the point that they're at now. And I think there's a lot of problems with them, but also a lot of benefits. I could see that kind of being advantageous for Bitcoin in a sense if you have all of the. I mean, think about this. Listen, think about this, Natalie, and this is to anybody in the room. Imagine you have 50,000 people, additional active people that are now running nodes, like just because they want to be involved in ordinals. Now, 50,000 is a big number. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, but that would be pretty cool. And that'd be a huge amount of people participating in the system. And not only are they now just participating in the system, but they get it. They now get it. They understand what a node is. They understand why it's important. They understand decentralization. And that has rippling effects, butterfly effects on every other chain and on the culture of people that are interacting with these assets and in this like quote unquote Web3 world, whatever we want to call it. So I think that's so important. And I think that when these conversations come up, and they're going to come up over and over, I'm telling you, this shit's not going to go away. They're going to come up in spaces, it's going to come up in tweets. We're now seeing Ethereum NFTs on OpenSea that are ordinal NFTs that you can like bridge over. There's one trending in the top 10 right now. I mean, that is nuts. I mean, that is nuts. Like, that's hard to even believe that it's true. So this is now coming to the forefront. People will now actually start to care about decentralization. At least I hope so. And while I don't think, and this last thing I'll say, while I don't think that these inscriptions are going to be the same in any way as what we're looking at ETH NFTs now, I think it's going to be a different culture, different people, different use case. It's just going to be different entirely. I do think it's going to be impactful. And this is the type of shit that we need that really makes us think, what are we doing? Exactly like you said, Natalie, figuring out what we're doing here, why we're doing it here, and I'm not an authority on the subject. I'm just trying to learn about it like everybody else. But I appreciate the people that have come up and spoke about it tonight because it's been a minute since I felt this type of passion for a topic. And that's pretty exciting. So, Natalie, I fucking appreciate you. Thank you for the takes. You really brought a lot here, a lot of inspiration for me as well. And I want to jump to the hands here. Before I do, let's reset the space. Do Bitcoin NFTs suck? Obviously not. It's a clickbait title. Transparency is key. If you're enjoying anything about this conversation, click that button in the bottom right hand corner. Show it some love, some likes, comments, and retweets. It's the best way to support the space. And give Natalie a follow. Give all the speakers a follow. Give Kuro and Buckets a follow. It takes 30 seconds to give them a follow, and we can't do it without them. So, and thank you to the community who's supporting these spaces day in and day out. I fucking love y'all. I want to jump over to the hands. We got to go to Truth first. Truth, I appreciate your patience. What's going on?
Yeah, for sure, bro. It's all love. Yeah, man. I think what we were discussing prior to a few speakers leaving the stage was information on ordinals. But since they're gone, I did post two threads up at the top. One, they're both from Dota, which is the gentleman that was specifically speaking to Phygital earlier. That guy has pretty much most of the knowledge. I think Ordinals wallet also does. I implore you guys to really look into this information before you start jumping in. This isn't like NFTs on Ethereum. It's a completely different scape, and it's a lot more technical, which means you should have some kind of knowledge in coding or some kind of manscape knowledge. You can't just walk into it thinking that it's going to be a breeze or it's like really centralized and easy, like OpenSea switch through your wallet kind of thing. And that's even a curve. So just do some research and do some information before you actually like say something or give your opinion, because half the shit that was just talked about had no understanding whatsoever. Dota had the knowledge. Ordinal has the knowledge. I think I don't know how you say your name, but the Pfizer guy, he has some knowledge. Give these guys the information. Talk to them. Give them questions, and really find out what's going on, because a lot of these opinions are meaningless. So just do some research, and I want you guys to be safe. I love you. I don't know what I was gonna say, but I love you.
Thanks, Truth. I appreciate it. And no, I 100% agree. I think this is not like there is a barrier of entry, which obviously offers, like, yeah, no, there's a barrier of entry, of course. And I think people learn a lot, just even how to run a node, how to sync it up, and everything that comes with that. I think the more that people know, the better the space. I mean, it's just like a direct correlation. If people are more educated, they understand the tech better, they're just going to be able to do cooler stuff. I mean, just direct one-to-one on that. So I find that really cool. There are going to be bad actors, and ZK was mentioned. And shout out to ZK too, because he is the one who really got me interested in this, because he was talking about it in one of our group chats almost a week ago, and he's been participating in it, and so shout out to him. But he said there's a lot of people that are, you know, they might say that they're going to mint something for you, or they say they're going to give you the real ordinal or the real inscription, ends up not being, it just being a copy, so on and so forth. He mentioned that he just gave zero.3 Bitcoin to an individual. Like, you have to just do peer to peer. So there's a huge amount of trust that exists there. But I think that is a throwback to how things were back in the day, and that's kind of cool. Just like Truth said, please be careful. Please be careful. So I want to go to the hands here. We'll throw it over to Ordinal. I saw you on mic. If you want to throw some thoughts in before we jump to the hands.
Well, I was just gonna say that that's the beauty of it, is that the people who provide the good service, they rise to the top, and in the long run they win. And the people who scam, they're just fucking scammers.
No, I agree. I agree. And that reputation that you build from being a good actor in that sense, it can't go away. It's stuck with you forever. So I want to throw it over to Kiro. Kiro, what's going on? And then we're going to go Mallard and CryptoBite.
Hey, I was just wondering, has anyone like figured out how to like wrap a ordinal, like kind of like wrap BTC on Ethereum, so that I could trade it on OpenSea and I don't have to trust anybody?
No.
Your question is there a way to wrap a UTXO containing the Satoshi that an ordinal is inscribed to?
Yes, exactly.
We should wrap Ethereum inside of ordinals, true?
So someone more knowledgeable on Bitcoin would have to answer that, but I believe the answer is yes, as far as my understanding. You'd be giving up the private key as part of that, but
yeah, that's kind of how I thought some of the earlier curve pool stuff was done.
Thanks, Kira. Let's throw it over to Mallard. Mallard, appreciate your patience. What's going on?
Hey, what's going on, man? Bitcoin maximalist here. First time on an NFT stage. Thanks for letting me up. I guess I wanted to say that previously you guys were talking about smart contracting on Bitcoin. And maybe there's a little bit of confusion here. Like, I mean, if you're going to say, let's say you're going to define a smart contract as this sort of self-executing program that's say stored on a blockchain when certain conditions are met, then yeah, I mean, technically Bitcoin's always had smart contracts because we have hash time lock contracts, and we use those extensively to interact with the Lightning Network, because you need to do an HTLC to open a channel with the Lightning Network. Now, Taproot's very interesting. Like, Taproot's very new, right? This upgrade happened. It signaled support by miners. I think it was December of 2021. So nodes within the Bitcoin network are unique, right? Because they can choose to checkpoint to whatever state of the network they want. It's part of the decentralization model. What that basically means is that if a miner passes, if a miner's signal support for something, nodes do not have to upgrade that. All upgrades are backwards compatible, and nodes can choose to run whatever core software that they want. So what you want in order for Taproot to really start working well is to have a significant majority of the nodes to run that software. And Taproot kind of enables the creation and execution of a pretty wide range of simple smart contracts. Multi-sig contracts, payment channels, the escrow contracts, say atomic swaps, maybe token contracts even. and some of these things that you can do with like ordinals. And look, I'm a sound money guy, but I'm really open to it. I think it's a really cool idea. Like the name ordinal is really cool. And like if you engage in ordinals, you're considered this like ordinal theorist. So it feels like you should be wearing a Jedi hood or something. And you know, it's like if you think about an ordinal, like just to kind of explain to people maybe who don't know, at least in Casey Rotemore, the founder of this, kind of his conception of it is that like if you think about just say an ordinal in math, it just refers to a numerical position of an object. So to like visualize that, you can say what's like the ordinal of New Year's Day. You'd say it would be first, right? January 1st. So like with ordinals, in the way he kind of, what I mean, conceives it, he kind of looks at Bitcoin and sees these periodic events. So you have blocks, right? Once every 10 minutes. You have this difficulty adjustment, like once every 2016 blocks. You have these halvings, like once every 4 years. And then you have cycles, which is like where both the halving and the difficulty adjustment like coincide on the same block. It happens like once every 24 years. You know what I mean? So this is kind of his thing. And the rarity of these get more rare, right? Because there's fewer halvings than there are difficulty adjustments. And there's fewer difficulty adjustments than there are blocks. So I think like the whole point of that is that's just his ordinal numbering scheme. I could just as well myself say, oh, hey, I'm going to go create the doubles ordinals. And I'm going to have like every UTXO, every Satoshi from block 666. So the first Satoshi from the first block of the difficulty adjustment 666. So I guess the point is that like the value of ordinals isn't necessarily just have to be based upon the content that you inscribe in them, but it can also be based upon their ordered rarity. I guess that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Mallard. I appreciate the take on that one. I want to throw it over to Crypto Byte. Crypto Byte, what's going on?
Not much. I'm just listening. I'm learning, and I don't know. I think that's all I got. I honestly, I don't know. I still stick with my kind of initial take on this. That it's interesting. Don't get me wrong. I think it's also interesting from an implementation standpoint. Um, but I don't know. I'm curious to see where it goes. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Crypto Byte. Post Capone, what's going on? So I see in your bio it says ETH versus Bitcoin is midwits arguing about shit they don't understand. ETH plus Bitcoin is plugging your controller into the second player port so Mantis doesn't know your moves. So I think it's pretty interesting bio. Post, what is going on?
Yeah, I mean, I totally stand by that. I think that there are plenty of very good criticisms from both sides of the fence for both Bitcoin and Ethereum, and there are also plenty of good justifications for both. I don't know that there are definitely sincere and authentic arguments that I've heard that materialize as like ETH versus Bitcoin, but I would say that the vast majority of the time that I hear somebody making like a heavily impassioned argument that one is the absolute solution or one is terrible, they generally strike me as disingenuous. I don't mean that as an accusation to anybody, but it's pretty rare that I hear somebody like make an ETH versus BTC case, and it's either very technical or it's overly emotional and unnecessary. In theory, both the networks are achieving like pretty similar goals, right? They want to maximize individuals' ownership. They want to disintermediate trade. They want to create hopefully like a decentralized authentication of the network or verification of the network, and they just do it in different ways. I like to kind of sum up that as Bitcoin takes an approach where they say, we are going to censor what can be written so that we don't have to censor who can write. Whereas ETH takes a little bit more romantic of approach and says, we're not going to censor what can be written. We're not going to censor who can write. And I think there's coolness. Like you might, some people like to describe Bitcoin's take as like the slow chess game, whereas ETH is like the move fast, break things approach. I think that's valid. Like I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. But yeah, so that would be the tip on that bio note. I thought I'd circle back to the question about the trustless way to wrap.
Can you just go back to what you said there? The move fast, break things. I mean that's something we use kind of when building software. How does that correlate to? That was interesting. How does that correlate to?
Well, so Ethereum places very minimal bounds on what an individual user can do. Like with a Turing complete scripting language that's pretty easy to grok. it's a very low friction ramp to getting into production and being a native part of the L1. The application layer is directly authenticated in the L1. It's fully supported there. Whereas, like the conversation of like, well, what happened to smart contracts in Bitcoin earlier, in regards to like Ethereum equivalent smart contracts, there were never Ethereum, I guess you could make an argument that at some point the opcodes for that kind of stuff existed, but they were intentionally left disabled from the Genesis block. Even that's kind of an incomplete view of it, though. But it's just different approaches. Like, Ethereum has move fast, break things in the sense that anybody can hop on and create any product they want and launch. But there's difficulties that you run into with that. Like, are the assets that are being created like of any material economic purpose, or is Tornado Cash provocative to the state, or there's texture to that conversation, and I don't think that it's wrong to say either. Like, Bitcoin's right for taking it slow and being a little bit more strategic in what it allows or tolerates, to ensure that everyone can use it for as long as possible. Whereas Ethereum says, like, no, like, we're going to rush in and break the walls down.
So
Like, these are both valid strategies.
let me ask a wild question. This will create some good controversy in here, and I like to create controversy every once in a while because I think we have a lot of good opinions. So, for all of the top global brands who are going to be coming into this space and hiring some of the top technologists, to work on building out, what I would say their version of what's going to be the extension of their sort of Web 2 world, and building out hold on a second, building out that hold on, into a world where whether anybody in this room likes it or not, it's going to happen, and a lot of people are going to adopt, the idea of digital ownership. It's going to be something that happens, right? Like, that will happen. So now, for all of the experts in here, do you think they care at all about, like, what do you actually, let me phrase the question. Let me not set this in a subjective manner. Let me phrase the question. What do you think they evaluate when they decide, hey, I've got an audience, that I want to communicate the idea of digital ownership to, and I'm going to be one of the big educators that's going to help out here, and I want to go put something on a blockchain? What questions do you think they ask? And the reason I want to say this is important, and I think that this is something that's being missed tonight, in a big way, is that money is going to fund all of this. We live in a capitalistic world. I state this all the time, whether people want to like it or not. We live in a capitalistic world, and every technology to date has been funded by money. We need money to pay the people to build it. So where we put the most amount of the money is where we get the most innovation. That's been true since the ages of the internet, and before that. So my question is, when the brands, the global brands, like the brands that have big money, want something fixed or want something done, where do you think they're looking to build? Like, I always am curious from the Bitcoin maxis. By the way, huge believer in Bitcoin as a reserve asset potentially, for the world, and what that blockchain does very well, is provide a decentralized, standard technology. But there's a famous saying out there that just because something is, used for one purpose, we don't use a screwdriver to do things that the hammer does, right? We have different tools for different jobs. It's true with any type of technology out there. So my question is, as we look at what's going to be built on, and we look at where the money is going to be spent, I'm very curious to hear where you guys feel. I see an Ordinal here, and a Post Capone, and a Natalie, and a Cipher. Where do you think that money is going to go? Where do you think
that the funnel that money will go into, and what do you think the outcome will be? Because I do have my theories on this. I always love hearing, others' thoughts. So yeah, that's the open question to
The
the.
the money
So
funnels
if
the money
oh,
funnels into the people who provide the most value, which means giving services and doing good services for the most people.
on a long enough time
Interrupt.
horizon,
That's an
yeah,
interrupt.
eventually it pans in something like that. I kind of want to break what you asked up into two parts if I can, and like I'm definitely down to unpack it. So when we say digital ownership, I think that you can very there's a lot of what digital ownership means, but I think that you can sort of quadrant it off into like two basic elements. One would be provable statements that are made by some actor, right? And the other would be the availability or verification of those statements.
Well, wait.
So
Yeah, let's kind of maybe bring that up a level.
sure,
I am
I'm going
Joe
to.
Bob. Hold on. I'm Joe Bob on Instagram. I like, I don't know, Louis Vuitton purses, and I heard that if I get a physical Louis Vuitton purse, then I get a digital sort of version of that that proves that I own that. So now break that down for the average person of what you think digital ownership means to them. Not what
Well,
it means to you. What does it mean to them?
sure. Well, it's about this sort of concept of ownership, and I think there's you could do Socratic seminars on the concept of ownership, till you died, and probably still not get all the way through the conversation. But uh, for the sake of like digital, specifically in the confines of digital ownership, for example, if you've got this digital account on some provider, like a Twitter account, right? There's nothing like materially stopping Twitter from just saying that you posted something that you did. Now, for a number of reasons, they're not going to do that, but there's nothing technically stopping them from doing that. Like if they wanted to, they could go and just be like, here's this post made it. We're just going to insert this thing in our database that says you said this post. So cryptography, sans blockchain, sans cryptocurrency, sans any of that, just cryptography by itself offers a solid half of the solution, where you can say that nobody can say that you said something you didn't say. You own this private key, and as long as you are the only person who knows the private key, then you're the only person that can write with that private key, and you own it. It's a mathematical evaluation of ownership that is, so infeasibly denied that we might as well just call it impossible. So that's part of this idea of ownership. Okay, so if I could change Twitter to where the posts were actually cryptographically signed statement, I don't change anything else about Twitter. The only thing I change is that your post is cryptographically signed by you. Well, anybody looking at it would know if somebody forged you making a post, right? So you own the thread that you say is your account. So that's part of this definition of the concept of ownership. The other part is disintermediation. So even with the cryptographically signed account, maybe Twitter doesn't allow you to push a post, or through any number of other things, they still control their database, right? Like they still own their database. They may not necessarily be able to forge a statement from you, but they own the database. So decentralization, which is, I think, it's a very debatable buzzword in terms of like what it actually means or what's actually meaningful about it. But in my mind, it really points towards disintermediation and says like there's always going to be some means by which the information that you want to exist, the messages that you send to be read, right? Um, and to go into the second half, when you talk about the big players coming to the game, money driving it, absolutely, it'd be silly to deny that. Big players, though, and this is just I'm not saying this should or shouldn't happen. It's just sort of a fact of life. Big players are big because they're good at some game. They got big because they're good at some game. And through the process of playing that game over and over again, they accumulated resources. Google dominated the internet by just being really good at the internet, and they're a centralizing force on an internet. So the sort of sociological ambition of a decentralized network, whether it's well targeted or actually happens or anything like that. The theoretical sociological ambition is to create a game where it's easier for more people to gain some of that edge value, right? Like it doesn't as quickly consolidate to the center. And the reality is that it's a perfectly fine and rational argument to make that that game is eventually going to get won by somebody anyway. Like things just naturally consolidate around the better players, and you can't you don't know for sure that you can avoid that. But the problem with that idea, in specifically in relation to cryptocurrency networks, is that there's no point in this shit if it centralizes. Like if you're relying on a very small subset of verification entities of database managers
No,
that
no, no.
can
So
that,
let's back up. I think you missed. I do not think that's the case, and that's again
oh,
where
I'm not saying it is the case. I'm just saying that
hold on. So let me just say that I do not think that this will be owned by one group of people. I believe that there will be specific blockchains which each big player chooses to use, or multiple will conglomerate on one. And I'm asking you specifics of,
yeah.
do you think, hold on, do you think these big players are interested in investing even a dime in the Bitcoin chain, in making it the asset, the most owned asset chain outside of being, I'm referring this more to digital collectibles, right? Digital collectibles, forget about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is its own beast. It will be on a decentralized network. Do you think that any of these big players care or are interested in investing a dime in improving or building onto the Bitcoin blockchain when they have the opportunity? Hold on. They have the opportunity to invest in many other blockchains that are way more advanced and can do things way faster and way more efficient than anything the Bitcoin blockchain will ever do. Like that, this is the
So
fundamental question that
part
I ask. So
part
yes,
of part of the answer is what was said, right? Which is big players become big players because they win games. That's
no,
there's some
they're
game that
not
you win.
doing that though. See, this is
No,
where
I'm
this.
just talking abstractly. I'm not saying some
No,
particular case in
I
crypto.
wanna
Like
talk
in
what.
general in life,
No, no, I
big players
know
become
that,
big
but
players because they win
let's
games. That's how that
let's
happens.
back out of the hypothetical for a second and look at the
It
practical and the what's going on.
what's not practical about that hypothetical? Why is that
No,
hypothetical
no,
not applicable?
hold on a second. Let me actually ask this a different way. What do you observe today that's happening in this space outside of the Bitcoin blockchain?
I see games that can be won and are being won and creating bigger players. Which I mean, and I'm not saying that's even like good or bad thing. I'm just saying like that's math and that's how life works. I mean, trees are in the market for sunlight, right? And certain trees do a better job of growing taller faster and getting more of the sunlight. They're winning the game in the market of sunlight. Like this is I realize that you're wanting to have something more pragmatic rather than hypothetical, but this is a hypothetical that just is universally applicable. It's a rationalization of reality. It's just described in an abstract way. That's it. So there are games, and this happens in Bitcoin too. I mean, the hash rate consolidates over time. We've seen it. Like games that can be won do get won, and the winners of games become bigger players. Now, the second part of that, what I was trying to get at was that blockchains as we know them today, like decentralized, publicly permissionless, publicly authenticated blockchains, or verified rather, blockchains, they're not really conducive to quote unquote big players. Big because by the time a big player wins enough of the game, they're now paying for a very expensive, complicated web server. There's all this engineering head and block production processes that go on that they don't have any use for because they won the damn game. Why the hell does the winner of the game want all this engineering overhead? The engineering overhead exists explicit. You could have the Twitter database where everybody cryptographically signs their messages, but Twitter still owns the database, and it would work. Like it would be fine. It would just be a centrally owned database. Blockchains exist for the purpose of having a decentrally owned well, the blockchains as we use the term, technically speaking, blockchains is like sort of a tangent to that, but whatever. As we typically use the term, cryptocurrencies that exist on public permissionless networks using blockchain for state replication exist for the purpose of decentralizing the authentication. By the time you have somebody win enough of the game, this shit it's just a really, really expensive express server. It doesn't make any sense. So I just don't think, and also I think you can kind of see this in the history of blockchain assets or cryptocurrency assets. Like how many times in the last 10 years has there been an asset that was like, we partnered with Mercedes and it just fucking shit the bed? Like, which like Mercedes examples in particular was like people signing up for an open partnership that like anybody could sign up for and then just plopping Mercedes logos on their website. That's just scams. It didn't even really have anything to do with Mercedes. But the point is that of course, big players are attracted to the space because it's a game. It's a game that can be won, and they like games they can win, so they come and play games they can win. But in the long term, if what happens is some small subset of participants win, then the technology becomes pointless. It might as well just be like I said, an express server. Just make an express server and have people sign messages with a private key. Apple has that built into iOS 16 right now. Like they do key management in iOS 16. You can digitally own your stuff in Apple, and I think that's more of what you're likely to see in a long term sense, right? Like,
I totally disagree with that. But outside of me disagreeing with that, just so I understand your view, you came in saying you were a Bitcoin maxi. Was that right? Was that the term you were using?
no, I mean, I do very much like Bitcoin, and I do also think that Ethereum has a lot of promise.
Okay, how much time have you spent just studying all the other chains and activity that go on the chain?
Oh, I did about a year and a half of research on IOHK's work with Ouroboros and all of that. Before that, I was very deeply interested in both Bitcoin and Ethereum. I didn't get really involved in like directly playing with Ethereum until about 2 or 3 years ago. But I mean, years, right?
All right, maybe more along the lines of where the money's going, because you said just making a cryptographic express server that would completely defeat the purpose.
I agree. That's
Well,
my point. Is that my
okay.
point is that it would
What do
defeat
you
the purpose.
let me ask another dumb question then. What do you think about Polygon layer 2 and the way that works?
I think that it's it sacrifices a lot of what a lot of people might have as like their tabula rasa or their like consideration of what they think Bitcoin or excuse me blockchain should be. It sacrifices a lot of that in order to like tackle technological challenges. I think it's entirely replaceable. I think that it sort of serves its purpose in facilitating some user experience, but I don't think that I don't see it as some kind of like prescient important technology that's going to matter 10 years from now.
All right, so I'm aligned. You see Polygon fading away.
Yeah, if you're interpreting what I'm saying as some sort of like this shit will centralize or that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if players that win games very well continue to win games on these stacks and the stacks consolidate into few interests, then the stacks become irrelevant. If those things happen. So in order for this shit to exist, it is sort of driven towards distributing the winnings of the game to driving value out to the edges. That's sort of an inherent part of it. And that is to answer your question about digital ownership. That's I think part of digital ownership is creating games that distribute value out to edges. I don't think that you can have true digital ownership without also driving that. This was all really like to answer your question about digital ownership. I realize it went on for a little while, but that's really what it is.
Yeah, I'm just always curious to see where people sort of stand in this. That's all.
Well, I appreciate the exchange between you two. A lot of good information in there. I want to quickly throw it over to Cypher, and then we're going to go to Marm. Cypher, what's going on?
Yeah, if it's okay, I'd actually just like to take a crack at the same question Crypto was asking.
Please.
So specifically, my understanding is you're asking, given a business with a reason to create a digital asset, why Bitcoin, why Ethereum, why any of these particular stacks, right?
Or even better, here we go. Why blockchain? Again, we got really theoretical in that last example, but if we look practical, why do you think these billion-dollar companies even care about blockchain?
And
They don't.
I ask this because, sorry, what?
I said they don't. Unless it affects their
All
bottom
right.
line, they don't care
Oh,
about blockchain,
oh,
right?
wait. Okay. Well, hold on a second. So now you did hit something. Unless it affects the bottom line. Okay. So now let's say it does affect their bottom line. They realize that. Why do they care about blockchain?
Sure, you're talking digital permanence, but realistically, they only are going to care about blockchain so long as the customer cares about blockchain.